The sleek black car pulled into the driveway just as the sun began its descent behind the old oak trees. Richard Torres sat behind the wheel for a moment, staring at the house where he'd grown up. 3 months. It had been 3 months since he'd last visited his father. 3 months of excuses, of missed phone calls, of texts that said, "Sorry, Dad, stuck in meetings," and "I'll visit soon, I promise." The house looked smaller than he remembered, or maybe he'd just gotten used to his glass and steel penthouse downtown. This place, with its brick facade and slightly overgrown garden, felt like it belonged to another lifetime. A simpler time before the company, before the billions, before his life became an endless stream of board meetings and business deals. Richard grabbed his briefcase and stepped out of the car. His phone buzzed immediately. Another email. Another crisis that apparently only he could solve. He silenced it and slipped the phone into his pocket. Whatever it was could wait an hour. The front door was unlocked, which bothered him. He'd told his father 100 times to keep it locked. But the old man was stubborn, always saying this was a safe neighborhood, that he'd lived here for 40 years and never had a problem. "Dad?" Richard called out, stepping into the foyer. The smell hit him immediately. Something cooking, something that smelled like his childhood. Pot roast, maybe? His mother's recipe, but that was impossible. Mom had been gone for almost 2 years now. The house was immaculate. Richard noticed it right away. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, fresh flowers sat in a vase on the hall table. Someone was taking excellent care of the place. The agency he'd hired must have sent someone good. He'd found the agency online 6 months ago, picked the highest-rated one, and signed whatever paperwork they'd sent over. It was handled by his assistant, really. He'd just approved the expense. $25 an hour for someone to come in 5 days a week. Cook meals, do light cleaning, keep an eye on his father. It seemed like a reasonable solution at the time. Richard set his briefcase down and walked through the first floor. Everything was in its place, but there were small changes. His mother's favorite blanket, the one she'd knitted herself, was draped over the back of the couch, positioned perfectly. Photos had been rearranged on the mantel, grouped by year. The bird feeder outside the window was full. Cardinals and blue jays fighting for position. "Dad?" He called again, louder this time, still no answer. Then he heard it. A sound from upstairs. Not quite a shout, but close. His father's voice, strained and frightened, followed by a thud. Richard's heart stopped. He ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. His mind already racing through terrible possibilities. Heart attack, stroke, a fall. At 79 years old, any of those could be fatal. What he saw when he reached the top of the staircase froze him in his tracks. His father was on the stairs, about halfway down. He was tilted backward at a dangerous angle, his hand slipping off the polished wooden railing, his feet scrambling for purchase on the carpet runner. His eyes were wide with fear, his mouth open in a gasp. Richard watched it happen in slow motion. His father losing his balance, gravity taking over. The moment before the fall that could break bones, crack skulls, end everything. But then she appeared. A woman Richard had never seen before moved faster than should have been possible for someone her age. She was in her 60s, maybe, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a soft blue cardigan, and she was small, barely 5'3". But she launched herself at his father without hesitation. She caught him. Actually caught him, wedging her body between his father and the stairs, her back slamming against the railing with an impact that made Richard wince. Her arms wrapped around his father's chest, taking his full weight. Richard could see the strain on her face, the way her jaw clenched, the slight tremor in her arms. But she held steady. "I've got you, Mr. Andrew," she said, and her voice was calm, impossibly calm. Like this was just another Tuesday. "You're safe. I've got you." Richard finally remembered how to move. He lurched forward, reaching for his father, but the woman held up one hand, stopping him. "Wait," she said firmly. "Let me assess first. If he's injured, moving him wrong could make it worse." Richard stopped, feeling useless and frightened and completely out of his depth. The woman, whoever she was, kept one arm around his father while her other hand gently checked his head, his neck, his shoulders. "Mr. Andrew, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice soft now, soothing. "Does anything hurt? Your back, your hips?" "I'm okay, Helen," his father said, though his voice shook. "Just lost my footing. That corner of the carpet it always catches." "I know," she said. "And I'm fixing it tomorrow, no arguments. But right now let's get you sitting down. Can you bend your knees for me?" Slowly, she guided him down to sit on the step, moving with him, never letting go. Once he was safely seated, she knelt beside him, her hands checking him over with practiced efficiency. She felt his arms, his legs, checked his pupils, asked him to squeeze her hands. Professional but gentle, like a nurse who'd done this 1,000 times. "Nothing broken," she announced after a moment. "You're going to have a bruise on your shoulder where you hit the wall, but that's all. You got lucky today, Mr. Andrew." "I got you," his father said, and he actually smiled at her. "Don't know what I'd do without you, Helen." That's when she seemed to notice Richard for the first time. She looked up and her eyes went wide with surprise. "Mr. Torres," she said, "I didn't know you were coming today. Your father didn't mention it." "I didn't tell him," Richard said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears. Tight. Small. "I wanted to surprise him." Helen nodded once, then turned her attention back to his father. "Let's get you to your room, shall we?" Nice and slow. "Richard, I'll need your help on his other side." It wasn't a request. It was an instruction, delivered with quiet authority that made Richard move without thinking. He took his father's left arm while Helen supported the right, and together they helped the old man to his feet. Richard was shocked by how fragile his father felt. When had he gotten so thin, so unsteady? The strong, solid man who used to carry Richard on his shoulders, who'd taught him to throw a football, who'd seemed invincible. When had he become this delicate? They walked slowly down the hallway, Helen keeping up a steady stream of gentle conversation. She asked about his father's breakfast, whether he'd remembered his blood pressure medication, if he wanted chamomile tea or something stronger. She knew his routine. She knew him. His father answered her questions easily, naturally, like they'd had these conversations 100 times. Because, Richard realized with a sick feeling in his stomach, they probably had. They helped his father into his bedroom and settled him in the armchair by the window. Helen brought a footstool without being asked and positioned it perfectly. She draped a light throw over his lap, adjusted the blinds so the afternoon sun wasn't in his eyes but he could still see the birds at the feeder. She brought him water and his reading glasses. She moved around the room like she'd lived there for years. "I'm going to make you some ginger tea," Helen told his father. "It'll help with any soreness. And I want you to rest here for at least an hour. No trying to go back downstairs." "Yes, ma'am," his father said, and there was real affection in his voice. Helen turned to Richard. "Could we speak in the kitchen, Mr. Torres?" He followed her downstairs, his mind spinning. The kitchen was spotless and organized. Fresh herbs grew in small pots on the windowsill. A shopping list hung on the refrigerator in neat handwriting. A calendar on the wall showed doctor appointments color-coded by type. Helen moved to the stove and stirred a pot of what smelled like beef stew. Then she turned to face him, and Richard braced himself for anger, for accusations, for everything he deserved to hear about being an absent son. But her expression was kind. "Sad maybe, but kind. Your father's balance has been getting worse," she said quietly. "The doctor says it's normal for his age, but it's progressing faster than we'd like. This is the 3rd time he's nearly fallen this month. 3rd time." Richard felt like he'd been punched. "He doesn't want to worry you," Helen continued. "He tells me all the time how busy you are, how important your work is. He's so proud of everything you've accomplished. He doesn't want to be a burden." Each word landed like a stone in Richard's chest. "I've been trying to get him to use a walker, at least in the house," Helen said. "But he refuses. Says he's not that old yet, says he's fine. But Mr. Torres, he's not fine. He needs more help than he's willing to admit." Richard looked at this woman. Helen, her name was Helen. She had tired eyes but a gentle face. Her clothes were worn but clean. Her shoes were practical, the kind nurses wore, and she'd just saved his father's life. "Thank you," Richard managed to say. "If you hadn't been there." "But I was there," Helen interrupted softly. "And I'll be here tomorrow and the day after that. Taking care of your father is my job, Mr. Torres. It's what I do." But it wasn't just a job. Richard could see that clearly. The way she'd caught his father. The way she spoke to him. The way his father looked at her. This was something more. "How long have you been working here?" Richard asked. 6 months next week. 6 months. Richard had been so busy, so consumed with closing the merger, with expanding into Asian markets, with everything that had seemed essay. Richard called his assistant that evening and told her to clear his schedule for the rest of the week. She sounded shocked. He never took time off, never canceled meetings, never put anything before the company. But he was firm. Everything could wait. Everything except this. He spent that first night in his old bedroom, surrounded by high school trophies and faded posters. His mother had kept everything exactly as he'd left it. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment on the stairs over and over. His father falling. Helen catching him. The terrible knowledge that he could have lost his father today, and he hadn't even known his father was at risk. The next morning, Richard woke to the sound of voices downstairs. He checked his phone. 6:20 in the morning. Who was here this early? Helen wasn't supposed to arrive until 8. He'd checked the contract his assistant had filed. He got dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, following the sound of laughter to the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway, staying out of sight. Helen was there, sitting at the kitchen table across from his father. 2 plates of scrambled eggs, 2 cups of coffee. The morning paper spread between them. The radio played softly in the background, some jazz station. They were talking and laughing like old friends. So then what happened? His father was asking, leaning forward with interest. Well, my nephew thought he could fix the sink himself, Helen said, grinning. Didn't call a plumber because he wanted to save money. 3 hours later, there's water everywhere, he's soaking wet, and he finally calls me begging for help. His father laughed, a real belly laugh that Richard hadn't heard in years. Sounds like someone I know. Remember when I tried to fix the washing machine? Your wife told me that story, Helen said, smiling. Said you flooded the entire basement. She never let me forget it either, his father said, and there was warmth in his voice, not pain. He was talking about his late wife like it was a good memory, not something that hurt too much to mention. Richard checked his watch again. 6:20. Helen had been here since at least 6, maybe earlier, having breakfast with his father like it was the most natural thing in the world. He stayed quiet, watching. Helen stood and refilled his father's coffee, adding cream without asking how much. She knew. She brought over a pill organizer and set it beside his plate. Don't forget, she said. I know, his father grumbled good-naturedly. You're worse than my doctor. Your doctor only sees you once a month, Helen replied. I see you every day. Someone has to make sure you're taking care of yourself. His father took the pills with his orange juice, and Helen gathered the empty plates. They moved around the kitchen together with easy familiarity, like a dance they'd practiced 100 times. Richard waited until 8:30 to make his appearance, pretending he'd just woken up. When he came into the kitchen, Helen was arranging fresh flowers in a vase. Good morning, Mr. Torres, she said. There's coffee made, and I left some breakfast warming in the oven for you. You didn't have to do that, Richard said. I made extra anyway, Helen replied with a shrug. Seems silly to let it go to waste. Richard poured himself coffee and sat at the table. Through the window, he could see his father in the backyard filling the bird feeder, moving slowly but steadily, Helen watching from the doorway. He loves the birds, Helen said, noticing Richard's gaze. Knows all their names. Well, not their actual names, but he's named them all. That cardinal is Charlie. The blue jay is Betty. There's a sparrow he calls Frank who comes every morning at 7:15, regular as clockwork. Richard realized he didn't know his father watched birds, didn't know he'd named them, didn't know any of these small details that made up his father's daily life. Over the next few days, Richard watched and learned. He saw patterns he'd never noticed before. Every morning at 9, Helen brought his father the newspaper and they read it together. Not because his father couldn't read. He could, though the small print gave him headaches, but because he enjoyed the company. They'd discuss the articles, debate the politics, argue about sports. His father came alive during these conversations, engaged and sharp. At 10, they'd play chess in the living room. Richard watched one morning, surprised to see how focused his father was, how carefully he considered each move. Helen was a good player, but his father was better. The game stretched over an hour, both of them silent and thoughtful until his father finally declared checkmate. Good game, Helen said, smiling. You're getting too good for me, Mr. Andrew. You're getting better too, his father replied. Remember when you first started? You didn't even know how the knight moved. But Richard could tell Helen had known how to play all along. She'd asked his father to teach her, given him a purpose, a way to share something he loved. It was a gift disguised as a favor. Lunch was always simple but homemade. Soup and sandwiches, salads, leftovers transformed into something new. Helen cut his father's food into smaller pieces without making it obvious. made sure everything was easy to manage. She'd noticed his hands didn't work as well as they used to, the arthritis making it hard to grip, so she quietly adapted. After lunch, Helen would walk his father upstairs for a rest. Richard followed one day, curious, and heard her reading to him. Not the newspaper this time, but a novel, something about World War II pilots. Her voice was steady and calm, and within minutes Richard heard his father's breathing slow and deepen. She was reading him to sleep. When she emerged from the room and found Richard in the hallway, she didn't look embarrassed. "He sleeps better with some background noise," she explained. "Says the house is too quiet otherwise. So I read to him most afternoons." "You don't have to do that," Richard said. "I know," Helen replied. "But it helps him and I enjoy it. Win-win." Richard noticed other things too. The way Helen had reorganized the kitchen so his father could reach everything without straining. How she'd labeled the cabinets with large clear print. How she'd moved the coffee maker to the counter instead of storing it away because his father liked having coffee multiple times a day. The calendar on the wall caught his attention. Doctor appointments in blue ink, physical therapy in green, medication refills in red, and every Thursday in purple marker make lemon cake. "What's the lemon cake about?" Richard asked her one day. Helen was folding laundry, her hands working automatically. She went still for a moment. "Your mother passed on a Thursday," she said quietly. 2 years ago next month. Your father doesn't talk about it, but I can tell. He gets quiet on Thursdays, withdrawn. So I bake lemon cake that day because I found your mother's recipe in her cookbook, and I thought maybe it would help. A way to remember without it being so painful." Richard had forgotten. He'd forgotten that his mother died on a Thursday. Forgotten that his father relived that loss every single week while Richard was in conference rooms and business meetings. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice rough. "Nobody has to do anything," Helen said. "But I think we should anyway. Especially the small kindnesses. Those matter most." On Wednesday evening, Richard came down for dinner and found Helen setting 3 places at the table instead of 2. "Oh," she said, looking uncertain. "Your father invited me to stay for dinner. But if you'd prefer to eat alone with him, I can—" "No, please," Richard interrupted. "Join us, I'd like that." So they ate together. Chicken and roasted vegetables. A simple meal that tasted better than anything from the expensive restaurants Richard usually frequented. His father told embarrassing stories about Richard as a kid. Helen shared stories about growing up in a big family in Arizona, about her late husband who'd been a teacher. Richard watched his father's face. Really watched it. And he saw something he hadn't seen in 2 years, genuine happiness. His father was laughing, engaged, animated. He was present and alive in a way he hadn't been since Richard's mother died. And it was because of Helen. Because she didn't just show up and do her job. She showed up and cared. She treated his father like he mattered. Like his stories were interesting, like his company was valuable. She gave him something money couldn't buy, human connection. After dinner, Richard helped Helen with the dishes. She looked surprised but pleased. "You've done so much for my father," Richard said as he dried a plate. "More than you had to. More than anyone could expect." "Your father makes it easy," Helen replied. "He's kind, patient, interesting. Taking care of him doesn't feel like work." "Still," Richard pressed. "Coming early. Staying late sometimes, I'm guessing. Reading to him. Playing chess. The lemon cakes. That's not in any job description." Helen was quiet for a moment, her hands in the soapy water. "Can I be honest with you?" "Please." "When your father's wife died, he lost his partner, his companion, the person who knew him best in the world, and he's been lonely ever since. Not just alone, lonely. There's a difference." "I know because I've been there." "After my husband died, I was surrounded by people but felt completely isolated. Nobody really saw me. Nobody asked how I was and actually wanted to know the answer." She rinsed a glass and handed it to Richard. "Your father needed someone to see him. To treat him like a person, not a problem to be managed. So that's what I do." That afternoon, Richard asked Helen to sit with him in the living room. She looked nervous, smoothing her jeans and glancing toward the kitchen where dinner was starting to simmer. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. "No," Richard said quickly. "God, no. The opposite, actually. I just want to talk. Really talk. About you, about my father, about everything." She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. Richard had made tea, which seemed to surprise her. He poured them both a cup and settled into the chair across from her. I've been watching you this week, Richard began. The way you are with my father. And I need to understand something. Why do you do all of this? The early mornings, the extra time, the care you put into everything. This job must pay decent enough, but I know it's not enough to explain why you show up the way you do. Helen looked down at her tea. The silence stretched between them for a long moment. Then she started talking, her voice soft. I'm 64 years old, she said. Lived in this country for 35 years. Came here from Mexico when I was young. Married my husband Carlos 6 months after I arrived. He was the love of my life. We had a beautiful life together. Simple but beautiful. She paused, her fingers tightening around the teacup. We never had children. I couldn't, as it turned out. The doctors said there were complications. Things that couldn't be fixed. It broke my heart, but Carlos never made me feel less than. He said we had each other, and that was enough. Richard waited, sensing there was more. 5 years ago, Carlos started getting headaches. Bad ones. We thought it was stress. He worked construction, long hours in the sun. But it kept getting worse. Finally, we went to the doctor. Her voice wavered. Brain tumor. Stage 4. By the time they found it, there was nothing they could do. I'm so sorry, Richard said. We fought anyway, Helen continued. Tried every treatment, every experimental drug, every prayer we could think of. Sold everything we had to pay for it. Our house, our car, my jewelry, everything. We moved into a tiny apartment and I took every job I could find. Cleaning houses, working at a restaurant, doing laundry at a hotel. Anything to keep trying. She looked up at Richard, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He died 3 years ago, and the debt didn't die with him. I'm still paying it off. Hospital bills, treatment costs, funeral expenses. I worked 3 jobs just to keep my head above water. This job, plus weekends at a grocery store, plus evenings doing alterations for a tailor downtown. Richard felt something heavy settle in his chest. Helen, I'm not telling you this for pity, she said quickly. I'm telling you because you asked why I care so much about your father. And the answer is complicated. She set down her tea and looked Richard in the eye. When I took this job 6 months ago, I needed the money desperately. That's the truth. The agency said it paid better than most with regular hours and 1 client. I thought it would be straightforward. Clean the house, make some meals, keep an eye on an old man, easy. But it wasn't, Richard said. No, Helen agreed, because your father isn't just a client to me. He's a person, a good, kind person. And he was so lonely, Richard, so heartbreakingly lonely. I saw it the first day I met him. He'd walk around this beautiful house talking to photographs of your mother, eating meals in silence, lighting up like a Christmas tree when the mailman came just because it meant 30 seconds of human interaction. Richard's throat felt tight. And I understood that loneliness, Helen said, because I was drowning in it too. After Carlos died, my world got so small. Work, sleep, work, sleep. My friends drifted away. I was always working, never had time to see them. My family is back in Mexico. I'd go days without speaking to another person beyond taking orders at the restaurant or answering questions at the grocery store. I was alive, but I wasn't living. She smiled, sad and sweet. Then I started working here. And your father, he'd ask me questions, real questions. How was my day? What did I think about the news? What was my favorite movie? Little things that made me feel human again. And we'd talk. Not just polite chit-chat, but real conversations. About life, about loss, about memories and dreams and regrets. Helen's voice softened. He started showing me pictures of your mother. Telling me stories about their life together. About you when you were little. And I'd tell him about Carlos. About our life together. About Mexico and my family and all the things we'd planned to do that we never got to. And for the first time since Carlos died, I didn't feel invisible. He needed you, Richard said. Yes, Helen agreed. But I needed him too. When I come here every morning, I'm not just coming to work. I'm coming to spend time with someone who values my presence. Someone who listens when I talk. Someone who makes me feel like I matter. She looked around the room at the photos on the walls, at the books on the shelves. I see Carlos in your father. The way he struggles with jar lids now because his hands are stiff. The way he forgets words sometimes and gets frustrated. The way he tries so hard to maintain his dignity. To not be a burden. I saw all of that with Carlos during his illness. Her voice broke slightly, and I wasn't there enough. I was working constantly trying to pay the bills, and I missed so many moments. I missed dinners and conversations and chances to just sit with him. By the time he died, I had so many regrets about the time I didn't spend, the attention I didn't give. Richard understood now. So when you're here with my father, I'm doing for him what I wish I'd done more of for Carlos, Helen finished. I'm being present. I'm showing him that he's not invisible, that he's not a burden, that someone cares whether he's okay. Every chess game, every breakfast, every time I read to him, it's me trying to give him what I couldn't give my husband. Time, attention, care. They sat in silence for a moment. Richard heard the clock ticking, heard his father moving around upstairs. Your father talks about you constantly, Helen said. Did you know that? Richard shook his head. He has a scrapbook. Every article ever written about you, every interview, every mention in the business news. He shows it to me and tells me about all your accomplishments. His eyes light up when he talks about you. He's so proud, Richard, so incredibly proud. That should have felt good. It didn't. But there's always sadness underneath, Helen said gently. Because he misses you. Not your success or your money. Just you, your presence, your time. He'd trade every article in that scrapbook for one more dinner with his son. Richard had to look away. His eyes were burning. He made me promise not to call you, Helen continued. Every time he'd have a close call, every time his health worried me, I'd suggest calling you. And he'd say no. He'd say you were busy doing important things and he didn't want to bother you. He didn't want to be a burden on your life. So he became a burden on himself, Richard said bitterly. He became lonely, Helen corrected. There's a difference. He wasn't managing a burden. He was enduring isolation. There's nothing heavier than that. Richard rubbed his face with his hands. I've been a terrible son. You're here now, Helen said. That's what matters. You're paying attention. You're seeing him. That's more than a lot of people do. But it took seeing him almost fall down the stairs to wake me up, Richard said. What kind of person does that make me? A human one, Helen replied simply. We all get caught up in our own lives. We all lose sight of what matters. The important thing is that you've found your way back. Not everyone does. Richard looked at her, this woman who'd saved his father's life in more ways than one, who was working herself to exhaustion across 3 jobs while still showing up every morning with kindness and patience, who'd taken her own grief and transformed it into compassion for someone else. Can I ask you something? Richard said. If you're struggling so much financially, why not ask for help? There are programs, services, people who could... Pride, Helen interrupted, smiling ruefully. Stupid, stubborn pride. I'm from a generation and a culture where you handle your own problems. You work hard, you don't complain, you figure it out. Asking for help feels like failing. My father says the same thing about using a walker, Richard observed. I know, Helen laughed. We're both stubborn old fools. Your father and I are more alike than I'd like to admit. Maybe that's why we understand each other so well. Richard made a decision in that moment. He didn't know all the details yet, didn't know exactly how to make it work. But he knew something had to change. Helen had given his father dignity and companionship. She'd shown Richard what it meant to truly care for someone. She'd taught him lessons about humanity that all his success had never taught him. And she was drowning in debt from trying to save her husband. Working 3 jobs to survive, sacrificing her own well-being to care for others. That wasn't right. And Richard had the power to change it. Helen, he said carefully, I want to talk to you about making some changes. To your position here, to the arrangement. Would you be open to that? She looked cautious. What kind of changes? The kind that recognize what you've really been doing, Richard said. The kind that acknowledge that you're not just an employee. You're someone who's saved my father's life, someone who's teaching me how to be a better son, someone who deserves better than working herself to death while drowning in medical debt. Helen's eyes widened. Richard, I don't want charity. That evening, after Helen had gone home, Richard sat with his father in the living room. No phone, no laptop, no distractions. Just the 2 of them in the fading light. You've been different this week, his father said, looking at him with curious eyes. Quieter, more present.
Everything okay with the company?
The company's fine, Richard said. I'm different because I've been paying attention, Dad. Really paying attention. And I don't like what I've seen. His father frowned. What do you mean? When's the last time we really talked? Richard asked. Not about business or logistics or surface stuff. When's the last time we had a real conversation? His father thought about it, his weathered hands resting on the arms of his chair. I suppose it was at your mother's funeral. We talked quite a bit that day. 2 years. 2 years since they'd connected in any meaningful way. The realization sat in Richard's chest like a stone. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Richard asked. With your balance, your health, any of it? His father sighed. Because you have enough to worry about. You're running a billion-dollar company, Richard. You have thousands of employees depending on you. I'm not going to add to that burden with an old man's problems. You're not a burden, Dad. You're my father. I know what it takes to be successful, his father said quietly. I had a career too, remember? I know the pressure, the long hours, the weight of responsibility. I watched you build something extraordinary from nothing. I'm so proud of you, son. But I also know what it cost. What do you mean? His father looked at him with sad eyes. Your marriage fell apart because you worked too much. You don't have children because you never made time. You don't have hobbies or close friends or any life outside that company. You've sacrificed everything for success. And I'll be damned if I'm going to add to that by needing you. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Is that really what you think? That needing me would be adding to my problems? I don't want to be another item on your to-do list, his father said. Another obligation to manage. I want you to live your life, Richard. I want you to be happy, even if that means you can't be here as much as either of us would like. But I'm not happy, Dad. The confession spilled out before Richard could stop it. I'm successful, sure. I'm rich beyond anything we could have imagined when I was growing up. But I'm not happy. I wake up thinking about work. I go to sleep thinking about work. I can't remember the last time I laughed, really laughed, the way I heard you laughing with Helen the other morning. His father was quiet for a long moment. Your mother used to worry about you. Did you know that? I know she wanted me to slow down. It was more than that, his father said. She'd watch you work yourself into the ground and she'd tell me, Andrew, he's chasing something he's never going to catch. I'd ask what she meant, and she'd say he thinks if he just achieves enough, makes enough money, proves himself enough, then he'll finally feel like it's enough. But it never will be, because he's looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places. Richard felt tears prick his eyes. She said that? All the time, his father confirmed. She wanted you to find balance, to find love, to find life beyond achievement. But the cancer took her before she could tell you, before she could help you see what she saw. They sat in heavy silence. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening. Dogs barking, kids being called in for dinner, the normal sounds of life going on. I've been so lonely since she died, his father said quietly. This house is too big without her, too empty, too full of ghosts. Some days I'd sit in my chair and hours would pass and I'd realize I hadn't said a single word out loud. Not one. That's a strange kind of loneliness, son. Being surrounded by everything you loved and everyone being gone. Dad, I should have been here. I should have seen. You were building a life, his father interrupted. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what parents want. I don't blame you for anything, Richard. But I need you to understand something before it's too late. Understand what? His father leaned forward, his eyes intense despite his age. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I learned that too late. I spent decades climbing the corporate ladder, providing for the family, being important. Your mother was patient. She waited for me to slow down, to retire, to finally have time for us. We had plans. Travel the world, see all the places we'd dreamed about. Do all the things we'd put off. His voice cracked. Then she got sick. 6 months from diagnosis to gone, and I'd give every penny I ever made, every promotion I ever got, every achievement on my resume just to have one more morning with her, one more breakfast, one more walk, one more conversation. But I can't. And that's something I have to live with every single day. Richard couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Helen reminds me of your mother, his father continued. Not in looks, but in spirit. She's kind without expecting anything in return. She pays attention. She cares. When she asks how I'm doing, she actually wants to know the answer. That's rare, Richard. That kind of genuine human connection is the rarest thing in the world. I can see that, Richard managed to say. I've watched her with you all week. She saved my life on those stairs, his father said. But she's been saving me every day for 6 months. Just by showing up. By making me feel like I still matter to someone. Like I'm not just waiting around to die. You matter to me, Richard said, his voice breaking. Dad, you matter so much to me. His father reached over and squeezed Richard's hand. His grip was weaker than Richard remembered, but still warm. Still real? Then show me. Not with money or fixing problems or hiring people to take care of me. Just be here, sit with me, talk with me. Let me know my son before I run out of time. You have plenty of time, Richard said quickly. Maybe, his father said, but neither of us knows how much. Your mother thought she had plenty of time too. We all do until suddenly we don't. They talked until well past midnight. Really talked like they hadn't in years. His father told stories about Richard's mother, about their early days together, about dreams and regrets and moments of joy. Richard told his father about the loneliness of success, about the emptiness of having everything but feeling hollow inside, about how watching Helen care for his father had cracked something open in him. She's working 3 jobs, Richard said at one point. Did you know that? His father shook his head, surprised. 3 jobs, and she's still drowning in debt from her husband's medical bills. He died 3 years ago, and she's still paying off the costs of trying to save him. And somehow, despite all that, she shows up here every morning with kindness and patience and care. She's exhausted, Dad, she's struggling, and she still gives you the best parts of herself. I had no idea, his father said quietly. She never complains, never mentions it, because she has the same stubborn pride you do, Richard said. Neither of you wants to be a burden. Neither of you wants to ask for help, so you both struggle alone when you don't have to. His father was quiet, thinking, what are you going to do? I'm going to help her, Richard said. The way she's helped you, the way she's helped me, whether she knows it or not. I'm going to make sure she has security and rest and the freedom to stop working herself to death. She might say no, his father warned. Pride is a powerful thing. Then I'll convince her, Richard said, because she deserves better, and because she's taught me something important this week. What's that? That family isn't just blood, Richard said. It's the people who show up, the people who care, the people who see you and value you and treat you like you matter. Helen is family, Dad, whether she accepts it or not. His father smiled, tears in his eyes. Your mother would be so proud of you right now, the man you're becoming. The next morning, Richard was up early. He spent 2 hours on the phone before Helen arrived, calling his lawyer, his accountant, his financial advisor, making arrangements, setting things in motion. By the time Helen walked through the door at 8, everything was ready. Morning, she said, surprised to find him already up and dressed. You're up early. I need to talk to you, Richard said, before my father comes down. Please sit. Helen set down her bag slowly, looking worried. Is something wrong? No, Richard assured her. Something's right. Finally right. I've made some decisions and I need you to hear me out before you say no. She sat on the edge of a kitchen chair, her hands folded. I'm listening. Richard took a breath. First, I'm doubling your salary effective immediately. And you're only going to work here. No more grocery store, no more tailor shop. This will be your only job. Richard, I'm not finished, he continued. Second, I'm paying off your late husband's medical debt. All of it, every penny. You shouldn't still be paying for trying to save someone you loved. Helen's eyes went wide. No, absolutely not. That's too much. I can't. Third, Richard pressed on. There's a small house 3 blocks from here. Just came on the market. 2 bedrooms, nice yard, walking distance from here. I'm buying it and I'm giving it to you. No mortgage, no rent, no strings. It's yours. Helen stood up, shaking her head. I can't accept this. This is charity, Richard. It's not charity, Richard. 6 months passed like a dream Richard never wanted to wake from. He stood in the kitchen of his father's house. His house now, too. Watching the morning sun paint everything gold. The smell of coffee filled the air, mixing with the scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. Helen's recipe, perfected over months of Sunday mornings just like this one. Richard had moved back home 4 months ago. His penthouse downtown sat mostly empty now, used only when he needed to be in the office for back-to-back meetings. His business partners had thought he'd lost his mind at first. Then his productivity numbers came in. Turned out he worked better when he wasn't miserable. You're up early, Helen said, coming into the kitchen with a basket of fresh herbs from her garden. She'd planted it in the spring, right after moving into the cottage Richard had bought for her. Tomatoes, basil, cilantro, peppers. She brought something fresh almost every day. Couldn't sleep, Richard admitted. Too excited, I guess. About today? Helen smiled, setting the herbs on the counter. Your father's been talking about nothing else all week. Today was special. They were launching the foundation Richard had been working on for months. Helen had been instrumental in planning it, though she still seemed amazed that he'd asked for her input. Is he awake yet? Richard asked. Heard him moving around about 10 minutes ago, Helen said. He'll be down soon. She looked different these days, healthier. The constant worry lines around her eyes had softened. She'd gained a little weight, filled out, looked rested. She still came to the house every day, but now it was because she wanted to, not because she had to. She arrived at 8 and left by 3, giving her afternoons and evenings to herself. Time to read, to garden, to volunteer at the senior center, to have coffee with the friends she'd made in the neighborhood. The medical debt was gone, paid off in full the day after she'd accepted Richard's help. She'd cried when she got the confirmation letter. Cried for an hour, holding the paper like it was a miracle, which in a way it was. Morning, Richard's father said, shuffling into the kitchen. He moved better these days, more confident. He'd finally accepted using a cane, a beautiful wooden one Richard had found that looked dignified rather than medicinal. His father carried it like a walking stick now, barely relying on it but having it just in case. Morning, Dad, Richard said, pouring him coffee. Ready for today? Been ready for weeks, his father said, settling into his usual spot at the table. Can't believe we're finally launching this thing. Helen brought over a plate of eggs and toast perfectly made the way his father liked. They'd fallen into easy rhythms over the months, the three of them moving around each other like a family who'd been together for decades instead of less than a year. After breakfast, they gathered in the living room. Richard pulled out his laptop to show them the final version of the website. The Compassionate Care Foundation, it was called. The mission statement was simple: to help people caring for sick or elderly loved ones, to prevent them from drowning in medical debt, and to connect lonely seniors with companions who genuinely cared. It's perfect, Helen said, looking at the screen with shining eyes. Richard, it's beautiful. You wrote most of the content, Richard reminded her. I just made it look pretty. Over the past months, Helen had become the heart of the foundation. She'd interviewed potential companions, developed training materials, created matching criteria. She understood what people needed because she'd lived it. Both sides of it, the exhausted caregiver and the lonely senior. The first 10 matches are ready to go live tomorrow, Richard said. 10 people who need companionship, 10 people who need work. All carefully vetted, all prepared. Helen's been working with them for weeks. They're good people, Helen confirmed. Really good people. I think we found the right matches. And the debt relief program? His father asked. 5 families approved so far, Richard said. Medical bills paid in full. Should see the checks going out by end of week. We've got another 30 applications being reviewed. They spent the morning going over final details. Richard's father, despite his age, had sharp insights about the foundation's structure. He'd been in business for decades before retiring, and his experience proved invaluable. He'd come alive over the past months, having something to contribute to, something bigger than himself. Around noon, they broke for lunch. Helen had made chicken salad, and they ate on the back porch, watching the birds at the feeder. His father still knew all their names: Charlie the cardinal, Betty the blue jay, Frank the punctual sparrow who showed up at 7:15 every morning without fail. Your mother would love this, his father said, looking out at the yard. The foundation, I mean. She always said the best thing you could do with money was help people who needed it. I wish she could see it, Richard said. She can, his father said simply. I believe that. And I believe she's proud of you, son. Not for the money or the success. For this, for coming home. For choosing what matters. After lunch, Helen excused herself to go work on some foundation paperwork at her cottage. She liked having her own space to work in, she'd said. Her own little home office with a desk by the window and plants on the sill. Richard and his father sat in the living room, comfortable silence between them. They did this often now, just sat together, no agenda, no pressure. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Just being in the same room was enough. Can I show you something? His father asked after a while. He pulled out a photo album Richard hadn't seen before. It was new, the cover still stiff. Helen helped me make this, his father explained. We've been working on it for months. He opened it and Richard saw photos he'd seen 1,000 times before. His parents' wedding. His father as a young man. His mother with her bright smile. But these were organized differently, with handwritten notes beside each photo. Helen interviewed me, his father said. Asked me to tell her the story behind every picture. She wrote them all down so you'd have them.